Okay. All right, so we're going to look at three people. I tried to put them into chronological order. One person lived in Italy. Another person lived in 16th century Germany, and the other person lived in 17th century Germany. The first person we're going to look at is Leon Modena, who lived in Italy. We'll look a little bit about his background, and then we'll hear about him. He wrote his own autobiography, so it's one of the... That's stupid. He wrote an autobiography, and he was one of the first Jewish autobiographies, and it was really beneficial because it tells us a lot about Jewish life at the time. So just when we talk about Italy, the peninsula at that time was not a unified peninsula. There was lots of city-states, and every city-state had its own ruler, and they didn't get along with each other, and life was very different than it is today. Also, there was a whole piece of it. Milan, at the time, was ruled by Spain, so it had a whole Spanish population in there, and then the Spanish Inquisition issues came into that as well. 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain. They went all over the place. Many of them went east on the Mediterranean. A fair number of them landed in Italy. Italy, over the subsequent 150 years or so, was sometimes tolerant to the Jews, sometimes not tolerant to the Jews. Keep in mind that's where the Pope was, so it was largely a home of Roman Catholicism. And cities were constantly expelling and readmitting the Jews. So they never had any real stability in terms of whether they could stay where they were. They were often on the move. They could be someplace for 5 or 6 years and have to go someplace else, and have to go someplace else, and go someplace else. The first ghetto in Europe was established in Venice. The word ghetto means foundry. So it was established in an area where there's an iron foundry, which is where the word ghetto comes from. And then after Venice established ghettos, other places established ghettos as well. Now, ghettos were not places where the Jews had to stay 24 hours a day. Ghettos were places where they had to go at night. The Venice ghetto was locked at night, in theory, to protect the Jews, but that's questionable. But they could go out and do things around and about. Okay, so let's just read his bio, and then we will, and then we'll talk about him a little bit, and then hear what he has to say. So Leon Modena was a Venetian rabbi, cantor, preacher, teacher, author, and polemicist.
What's a polemicist?
Poet?
Person who gives speeches.
Oh, okay.
His father, Isaac, came from an old French family which settled in Modena after they moved to Bologna and later Ferrara, retaining the surname Modena. His mother, named Rachel, but renamed Diana by his father, came from an Ashkenazi family that had settled in Italy. Leon Modena was born in Venice, but spent his youth in Ferrara, Bologna, and Modigliana, I guess. He wanted to be a rabbi, so in 1592 he returned to Venice, but the Jewish lay leaders raised the age of ordination to 35 and then 40. So therefore he had to create his own job opportunities for income and recognition. He used his skills to serve as a legal clerk for the leading rabbis of Venice, a teacher of Hebrew and rabbinics for students of all ages, a popular preacher, proofreader, expediter, and author of dedicated poems in the Venetian Hebrew publishing industry, author of many Hebrew tombstone epitaphs, including his own, and a letter writer for his students. He also turned to gambling, a popular form of entertainment in Venice. Indeed, both to emotional and financial distress, he gambled intermittently, despite his own better judgment, with both Christians and Jews for the rest of his life. So as you read through his biography, and his biography is published and translated in English, you see that he's always getting into trouble because he spends all his money on gambling. He really was addicted to gambling. During his early years as a rabbi, he wrote some interesting responsa, and we'll skip the rest of the paragraph. And then in 1630, when the leaders of the Jewish community tried to ban gambling, he published a Hebrew pamphlet in the form of a rabbinic responsum, in which he questioned whether gambling was a sin according to Jewish beliefs, and challenged the lay leaders' authority on the issue of such a ban without rabbinic approval. But even the rabbis of Venice, on whose behalf he argued, opposed his views. So it was in his best interest to try to prove that gambling was was okay.
It's what he liked to do. Why, do we know why they decided to change the age of ordination?
They probably didn't want him to be a rabbi.
Oh, you think it was just for him?
Yeah, I think it was
Wasn't-
for him
Okay.
primarily. In Chaye Yehuda, which means the life of Judah, Modena recorded many of the details of his unhappy but productive life. His difficult family life included the death of 2 infants, the loss of 3 adult sons, Mordecai, who died by inhaling fumes during alchemy experiments, Zavulun, who was married by a Jewish gang over a Jewish woman, and Isaac, whom he banished to the Levant and who traveled as far as South America. His main source of solace remained his 2 daughters. Last paragraph. His life is not only an important example of the struggles of early modern rabbinic authority, but also of social history. His candid and extensive writings provide details about the social and economic conditions of the family, women, and children, about daily life, community, and religion, including the occult, magic ambulance, and especially Jewish-Christian relations. So I just picked a small piece. All I picked from here was his recollection of his early life. So I picked it from I picked selections from his birth until the birth of his first son. He's not really big on insight, so he's not really big on reflecting on things, but he was highly detailed, and he spent a lot of his time talking about his own wonderful exploits and all the amazing things that he accomplished. Some people call him, in one of the reviews I was reading, they called him the first Reform rabbi. Because what he did was he wrote a lot of responses trying to adapt Jewish beliefs and customs to what was going on in Italy at the time. Other people say no, he was trying to hold the line and maintain Judaism in a rapidly changing culture. So he was born on the tail end of the Renaissance, and again in somewhat of an unstable Jewish environment. I think, in the little bit that I put in here, that you can get a sense that his writing style, to me, was a little bit like Mark Twain, in terms of how he talked about himself. Okay, Marlene, you want to start?
On Monday, the 28th day of Nisan, corresponding to the 23rd day of April, 1571, between the 8th and the 9th...
The 18th.
18th, sorry, and 19th hour, I, the bitter and impetuous son, was born. I would almost, like Job and Jeremiah, curse that day. For why did I go out of the womb to witness toil, anger, and strife, and trouble, only evil continually?
Okay, so he was born, and what's he saying about his life?
Bad day.
Yeah.
Bad day.
Should have stayed put.
That's right. I should have stayed put. I was better off. And well, why did I have to come out and have to deal with all of these sorrows? Okay, keep going.
Wait, hold on. Okay. My mother experienced great difficulty in childbirth. I was born in the breech position. My buttocks turned around.
Arcing. No, I'm saying facing outward.
What did I do?
No, my typo should be facing outward. Second.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Okay, facing outward. So that calamities turn on me at the beginning. At the end of 8 days, with great joyous,ing, I was circumcised by a guy
Got one.
and noted Kabbalist Rabbi.
Menachem Azariah Fano.
Okay. May the All-Merciful preserve him and bless him.
Oh, okay, so he cursed his day, and the moment he was born, he already had problems. He was a breech birth and had trouble coming out. He goes out of his way, by the way. I left out most of the names, but he goes out of the way to name all the illustrious people who touched him during his life. So I was circumcised by this noted person. Okay, Barbara, you want to continue?
My family remained in Venice for about 8 months and then set out to return to Ferrara. I began to learn the alphabet from a certain so-and-so who was called Hazaneto Little Cantor.
Okay, so they called him the Chazaneto. So what does Chazaneto
Little
mean?
Cantor.
Chazaneto means little cantor. Okay.
And after that, from Isaac Supino. I really showed promise to my studies from the very beginning. At the age of 2.5, I recited the Haftorah in the synagogue, and at the age of 3, I recognized my Creator and value of learning and wisdom, and was able to translate the weekly Torah portion from Hebrew into Italian and understood it.
Wow.
Yeah, modesty was not his problem. Right.
pretty
So
good.
I remember he's writing this.
Right, he remembers
Later in
being
life.
2.5. That's what's
reciting
really,
Haftarah.
right, that's even more impressive, that he can remember he did this
Right.
at 2.5.
Right. So you can remember, and this is what he was able to do at 2.5 years of age. So, but you can also see what was important to him. It was important to him to say that he could do these Jewish things. Okay, keep going.
One day, while walking in the garden at twilight, I fell from a rock and pierced the palm of my hand and was sick for some days. I was also troubled with worms, and a certain woman gave me mineral oil to drink, from which I passed out and almost remained permanently unconscious. Soon after, I contracted smallpox. All these things happened to me before the age of 4. I remember them as if they had happened only yesterday.
Okay, so falling off a rock and piercing his palm is not that much out of the ordinary. Smallpox was a major problem.
Right.
Remember that child mortality rates at this time was really high. So lots of kids were dying. So he had smallpox and he managed to live from it, but a lot of people did. And I'm not sure what the worms were. I'm not sure what exactly it means he was troubled with worms. But any of you get mineral oil when you were kids? Yeah. It's not that long ago.
Paregoric, but that was it.
Wasn't that long ago that people stopped giving mineral
What
oil
did they
to
give?
kids?
I don't think I did Paregoric or anything.
Paracord?
Paregoric.
Paregoric.
That was this
I didn't use
stuff.
it.
It was vile. It was like licorice, but it had opium in it or something.
Hmm.
You can't. It's like gone now, but
Uh-huh.
that was like for upset stomachs.
Yeah,
That's what the
I never had
pediatricians
Paraguay.
gave.
Really?
For upset stomachs, my mom would take a Coca-Cola and sit on the counter for a while, and we'd
Just
drink
get
the
Tums.
syrup.
I'll have to look that up.
Okay, Lisa.
In the year 1575.
So 1575, how old was he? He was 4 years old.
We left Ferrara and moved to Colonia to engage in money lending in a pawn shop.
What did a lot of Jews do? They,
Money lending.
yeah,
Money
that's how they earned money. Okay.
My revered father took great pains to construct a ritual bath inside his house for the women to make their ritual
Ablutions.
ablutions. When our teacher left, my study partner and I went to the ritual bath to play, as young boys do. I fell into the bath, which was full to the brim. The other boy fled screaming, and when the members of the household heard him, they ran with my revered father and my mother, searching here and there for me, for they did not know where I had fallen. In the meantime, an hour passed, with me holding on with my hands to one side of the room of the bath, until the people of the house arrived. Then a servant girl threw herself into the water and pulled me out, and they carried me to a room laid out on bed like one dead from fright.
All right, so what did he fall into?
Mikveh.
Fell into the mikveh. So first of all, his father moved, and what was the first thing he wanted to try to do? He had to try to build a mikveh in the house for
Pretty
the,
simple.
for the women.
Was
household.
his
Pardon?
father a rabbi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so his father was a rabbi. And
Made a little more sense.
But he wasn't working as a rabbi, he was working as a pawnbroker.
Right, right.
And this is the part that reminds me of like being a Jewish Mark Twain, right? So instead of playing by the riverfront
Yeah.
and falling into the Mississippi, he plays by the mikveh and falls in the mikveh, and he's holding on there and screaming and yelling, and he can't get out of the mikveh
And he probably could have walked up the steps because it was only 3 feet deep anyways, right?
And so this time his mother still had money, or his father still had money. You can tell because he had money because they built a mikveh. You can tell he also because they had a servant girl. So there's somebody helping him in the house. Okay, keep going.
There in Colonia took place the wedding of my half-brother. At the table I recited words of Torah that my teacher had taught me, and those who heard it marveled.
Not from the modest.
Right, no, he definitely wasn't modest. And so not only could he read Haftorah, not only could he translate, but he could stand up and give a Dvar Torah, and everybody was amazed at the Dvar Torah
He could
that he
stuck.
could give. Okay, Fran.
In the month of Elul, at the end of the year 1578, we left Colonia and moved to Montanana, a village 5 miles away. My revered father set up a synagogue there in his house in order to pray to God. In the year 1579, at the request of the cardinal, my revered father of blessed memory was thrown into prison because of a debt of 1,500 scudi that had already been repaid. He sat there for 6 months. From that time on, we became impoverished.
Mm. Okay, so how did the authorities often earn money? They would often earn money by putting Jews in jail. So they put them in jail and then hope that they could be taken out of jail, or their relatives could come and pay for them. And so in this case, according to him, his father already paid the debt, but they put him in jail anyways, and that just put the end to his having any money at all. Okay, keep going.
In the month of Nisan, 1580, my revered father sent me to Ferrara, to the home of his nephew, so that I could be taught books and wisdom, and I was there for a year. One Shabbat, after I prepared talk on Parsha Truma, my teacher remarked, "I am certain that this boy will become a preacher to the Jews, for from his manner it is clear that he will be fruitful in preaching."
So another modest statement on his part.
Because now he's 9.
Yeah, that he's. So what's his father doing? Why did his father send him to Ferrara?
Maybe just 'cause he couldn't afford to keep him.
Yeah, maybe.
He
to
sent him there
study.
to
Yeah,
school.
right, to study probably. So he had enough money to send him off to learn, because often you couldn't learn in your own community, so you go
Right.
outside and you would learn something else. So he studied, and what did he learn? Books and wisdom.
Yeah.
All right, next, one more paragraph.
I had little instruction in playing an instrument, in singing and dancing and writing, I had a little instruction in playing an instrument, in singing and dancing, in writing and in Latin. But on account of the 2 maidservants who hated me and embittered my life by their wickedness, may their master forgive them, I returned home at the end of the year.
So he didn't last in Ferrara very long. But what's interesting here to me is the beginning of it, talked about his Jewish learning, but what's he learning now?
Secular
Latin.
things.
Yeah.
Latin and music.
Yeah, so he's learning cultural stuff, right? So living in Italy at the time and being part of the broader culture, there was a realization that you don't just sit and learn Mishnah and
This
Gemara.
must have been the wisdom part.
Right. So he's learning how to play an instrument and singing. And later on, it said it in the introduction, one of the things he did, he became a cantor. And
That's
he earned his living part-time as a cantor, and he also wrote, I think he wrote the first book of Jewish music, of Jewish cantorial music, Solomon Rossi. And he was the first one to write that down. So this is the beginning of his education. Okay.
In Iyar 1581, my revered father of blessed memory sent me to Padua to board at his table and study Torah under him. From him I learned the art of poetry and the language of letter writing. He loved me dearly from then until the day of his death.
I left out who it was that he studied
Yeah.
with. So he went to study with the rabbi.
Okay.
But what did he learn? He learned
Poetry
and letter writing. So he's getting a good broad...
He's getting skills, life skills.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of life skills, a lot of good broad education. So we're looking at a broader education than otherwise. Later on, we're going to look at mid-17th century or mid-18th century, and we'll look to see what an education was there. All right.
Because my parents wanted to keep me with them at home, God provided us with a young Italian who had just returned back from Sfat, and I acquired a useful teacher from whom I learned much. At the end of 2 years, he left us and went to Cyprus, where he married. From then on, I ceased studying with a regular teacher, but rather studied on my own. Alas, I lived throughout my best learning years without a teacher or master.
Oh, okay. So he had a teacher for a while. His parents didn't have any money, so they couldn't get another teacher. The guy from Sfat went off to get married in Cyprus, and so he had to learn on his own. During this time, we were becoming poorer and poorer. We were eating but not earning, because my revered father was terrified on account of the constellations that had fought against him. His heart would not stir him to make a decision to journey from a place where he fared badly to go to another to do anything similar. So the psychiatrists among you, what happened to Dad?
Didn't want anything.
Agoraphobic.
Yeah, agoraphobic, but I'm quite depressed, right? So you're reading it literally that he wouldn't go out, but
Yeah, but depressed. And,
yeah, he was depressed. He just wouldn't. He had too many tourists. And he says, "I'm not going to try again. I'm stuck here. I'm not going to move.
change.
Yeah, I don't want to make any changes anymore."
And sounds like he was
I'm
very
gonna
superstitious too.
Right, I was going to mention that too. So I
Yeah.
purposely put that part in about the constellations.
Right.
So was that superstition?
Sounds like it was legitimate in a way. I mean, that it was part of the fabric of what was going on there, on account of the constellations that fought against him. I mean, he didn't write it as if this is malarkey or anything.
Right. I believe that we're still talking about a period of time where belief in astrology
Right.
was pretty strong. And he really thought, another way, he could have said the fates were against me, but clear. He mentions it a number of times. He really thinks that there's something to this astrology thing. So his father won't go. His father won't move. Okay. After the death of my half-brother from the plague, I was dumbfounded and forlorn, for the heavens were battling against us. Alone and without any Jewish companions, I boarded a boat and went to Venice, and from there home to Montagnana. I foresaw from that day on that it had been determined by the constellations that I would not see any good. So here we have the plague coming in. One of the things that we see in the Middle Ages and later is the plague, and there's no plague hit everybody. The plague hit the Jews and hit the non-Jews. And so, again, a lot of people were died, and again, we have this idea of fate. Okay.
It's interesting, he doesn't say anything about his mom.
Right.
He says very little about his mom. He talks about his dad all the time. He doesn't say much about his mom. And he doesn't have any siblings, except for the one half-brother who's basically getting married when he was a baby.
Yeah, he does have siblings, but this book is largely about himself. Me, 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 me. And this is edited. So I pulled pieces out. So there was other pieces about siblings that I just didn't include in here.
Oh,
Okay, where siblings are going and who they were marrying, and I didn't put that stuff.
No, but there's nothing about relationships with siblings on
Yeah,
it.
well, he doesn't do relationships. He doesn't. His early autobiography is all about this and this and this and this and this and this.
This also doesn't take responsibility for very much either.
Right. Yeah, everything
Yeah.
happens to
It's all
him.
the constellations,
Yeah.
or being
It's all-
breached. Or
it's all the
something.
Right,
constellations.
if bad happened here, we can't move from it because it'll just follow us.
Mhm. Okay, his mother shows up.
Oh, there we go. Good.
After this, my mother spoke to me each day, saying, "If you would heed my command and comfort me in my troubles, you would take as your wife my niece, namely Esther, the daughter of my mother's sister, for she seems fitting to me." So what does his mother want him to do? Now he's old enough. So now he's about 18 years of age. His mother wants him to get married.
So his first cousin?
Yeah, his first cousin. So what we're
That
seeing
was
here,
absolutely normal.
what we're seeing here is that's okay in this setting. And
Oh, wait. As well as the dead girl, my first bride, so it's
where do we come to the dead girl?
the next sentence.
Okay. So in order to please my mother as well as the dead girl. Oh, you see that between me and in there's 3 little dots? Okay.
Yeah.
So I left that whole piece out. So what happened was he agreed. He agreed to marry Esther. And he went and they were all ready for the marriage, and she tried on her wedding gown, and she looked beautiful in her wedding gown. And then just before the marriage, she got sick and she died. So Rachel, Esther, right? So he never married Esther. So I guess when he talks about the constellations being against him,
Well, maybe they are.
maybe they were. So she had what I thought originally was a little cold, and then she got worse, and she died before the wedding. So then, in order to please my mother as well as the dead girl, so the dead girl was Esther, my first bride, who had hinted at it in her words, I agreed to marry Rachel, her sister. So since he was there already, and since Rachel was unmarried, and we were married on Friday the 5th of Tammuz, 1590. My wife became pregnant, and on Monday the 20th of Elul, 1591, she gave birth to a son. We were all sick in our beds, my wife most of all, but 8 days later we became a little bit stronger, and our boy was circumcised. So we've looked at like 18 years of his life, and we can see the moving, and we can see the illnesses, and we can see the education. Excuse me. If you want to go home and get on Amazon, you can take a look at the rest of his book. But it's really fascinating stuff.
The only
About his life.
positive things they really write that are memorable are the Jewish pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it seems like he specifically makes note, of his circumcision and for reading Torah and reading Haftorah.
Right. He was very proud about being Jewish. So he was very proud about being Jewish. He talked about his Jewish education, but he also talked right from the beginning about all the bad things that happened to him. Like he had a little black cloud.
Woe is me.
Yeah, woe is me. A little black cloud hanging over him. The tone of the next one is very different. Anybody know anything about Gluckle of Hamlet? So she wrote, a memoir as well. One of the few memoirs that we have from a woman. But why don't we read the introduction first, and then we can talk about her a little bit more. You want to read about the amazing woman?
Sure. The amazing woman who we are about to meet, Gluckel, is that?
Yep.
Meaning luck, was born in 1646 in Hamburg, Germany. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant and Parnas leader of the community. Gluckel's first husband, Chaim, was from, I hate these words, Hamel.
You can say Hamlin.
Hamlin was the trader in pearls who made his living buying and selling at local fairs and speculating in the pearl market for a profit. He shared the responsibility of the business and with his wife. Gluckel and her family stood at the periphery of the circles of court Jews, the international trader who serves the economic need of the Central and Western European princes.
Okay, so you understand what that means, court Jews? So court Jews were Jews of means, often in the money business, who, if the local princes needed money for a battle or to buy something or whatever, they would turn to the Jews. So the court Jews were the ones who provided them with the finances that they needed. So the inner circle was the financiers. He was on the outside. His family was on the outside of that inner circle. It was a family of means, for the most part. She had money. Okay, keep going.
Gluckel lived in a period of political instability in which warfare was almost constant. Travel was often dangerous. Children remained subordinate in the Christian-dominated world. Plagues were frequent. Infants and children often died. Paula Hyman comments, in Judaism...
You can skip that, just that.
That Gluckel situated her story within a tight-knit, self-governing Jewish community that was rich in institutions and sometimes beset by internal disputes. Its members were conscious of mutual obligations and defined Gentiles, or the uncircumcised, as she called them, as the other. For Gluckel, there is no secular space. Every aspect of life is governed by Jewish legal norms and ethical values. Hyman added that Gluckel clearly read and wrote Yiddish, but most unlikely to have read Hebrew. Her major source of Jewish learning was the voluminous ethical literature and collections of stories written in Yiddish for female readership.
Okay, so Jewish women would often learn German because they often conducted business, so they had to be able to speak with the locals. They would also be able to speak Yiddish, and there was a whole literature of books that were written specifically for women, because women weren't expected to read Mishnah and Talmud. They weren't expected to study Shulchan Aruch. So there were books, like there was a book called Chaye Adam, which means the life of man or life of human beings. There was a halachic book written in Yiddish that was written specifically for women.
So it was common for women to actually know how to read?
Yeah, know how to read German. And if you could read German, you could do Yiddish as well.
Right.
My grandmother, who was born in Poland, had a copy of Chaye Adam that she would read. And so I have it. She gave it to me at one point. It says, "You really yellowed book." That would be her book to read. There were also books of, if I remember, I'll bring it for you next week. There were books of women's tichinas, which were books of women's prayers. And these prayers were for all kinds of things. They were for general settings. But
Beautiful.
Yeah, right.
Do you know Dina, the woman who, she collected them all?
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh, she's in LA, I met her, but she found her way to them and translated them. They're just
Yes, maybe it's her book
gorgeous.
that I have, but I have a book of
Is
women's
it like the
prayers.
past 10 years published?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hers.
Okay.
There was one about over her son getting married.
Mm.
And, may your wife be good and may she welcome me. And they were gorgeous.
Yes, I'll bring some of those for you to see next time. But they're beautiful, beautiful prayers, and they're for life events that we don't normally have things for. So it's on the birth of a child and the death of a child and on pregnancy, and it's really, really gorgeous, gorgeous stuff written by and for women. Sometimes they would recite them in the synagogue, sometimes they would just recite them on their own.
Before lighting candles.
Yeah, gorgeous stuff. By the time Glauca was 40 years old, she had borne 14 children,
Oy. Wow.
of whom she lost only 2.
That's the real impressive part. that
Yeah.
She actually had 12 children
Mhm.
that didn't die.
And she had lived through the Chmielnicki massacres and the failure of the Sabbatean movement. The Chmielnicki massacres were in the Ukraine and Poland. So basically, I get this mixed up a little bit, but the goes one way or the other. But I think that the Polish peasants were under the thumb of the Ukrainians, and the Poles revolted against the Ukrainians, and the head of the Polish rebellion was a guy by the name of Bogdan Chmielnicki. And Bogdan Chmielnicki led a revolt. So if you go to Poland, you'll see statues of Bogdan Chmielnicki as the leader of the revolt. What the statues don't tell you is that when they went to attack the Ukrainians, who were the ones who collected the money for the Ukrainian lords? The Jews. So there were huge massacres of the Jewish population because it was easy to kill the Jews first, and so there were thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews, like a precursor to the Holocaust. So this really led to, massive deaths. It led to decimation of communities. It led to a tremendous depression because of all these people who were killed. So a short time after that was the, what does he call it here? The Sabbatean movement. Do you know what the Sabbatean movement was?
Wasn't it an uprising of Jews who wanted to, it was a Jewish revolt, wasn't
Well,
it?
similar to a Jewish revolt, although it was a pacifist revolt. So there was a tremendous depression among European Jewry at this point in time because of centuries of being put down, and then this Chmielnicki revolt. So there was also a big upsurge in Messianism, a big surge in the belief that the Messiah was coming. So along comes this guy whose name is Shabtai Tzvi, who was originally born, I believe, in Turkey, in Smyrna in Turkey, and then he made his way around. And he declared himself to be the Messiah.
Right.
And he declared himself to be the Messiah by totally upending Jewish practice. He says, I'm not going to keep Shabbat anymore, and I'm not going to keep kosher anymore, and I'm going to marry 3 wives. I'm going to do all these strange things. And he said, I'm the Messiah. And then he had a guy from Gaza, Nathan of Gaza, who was his publicist, who was really good at promoting it. Sent notes out all over the Jewish world telling people that the Messiah was here and the Messiah was coming soon. And the Messiah was going to bring world peace, and the Messiah was going to bring everybody back to Israel. And people were really excited throughout Europe and throughout the Middle East that it was going to do this. Now, people were literally packing their bags and getting ready for this moment when the giant eagles would come and take them, or whatever it was. And Shabtai Tzvi probably believed that he was the Messiah as well. The Caliph of Turkey was not very happy with this because he believed that having somebody say, I'm the Messiah, is going to pardon?
Diminish his power.
To diminish power and also be a source for armed revolt. So Shabtai Tzvi, in his arrogance, decided that he was going to go to the Caliph of Turkey and talk to the Caliph of Turkey and tell him, I'm the Messiah and let my people go, just like the story of Pharaoh. So he went to Turkey and he presented himself before the Caliph and he said, I'm the Messiah, and the Messiah and the Caliph basically said, hell you are. And he said, I'm going to give you a choice. Your choice right now is convert to Islam, or I'm going to kill you. So what did he do?
He converted.
Right, he converted to Islam. So he quickly converted to Islam. He was put in seclusion, and from seclusion he continued to have his followers. People continued to believe that he was still the Messiah. and they equated him and found biblical proofs and support texts that he was just like Esther. So what was Esther's story? She lived as a non-Jew in the court and saved her people, so they continued to believe that was going to happen. And ultimately the Caliph saw that all these people were coming to him and bringing him presents and meeting outside his window, and so they sent him off like they did to Napoleon, although Napoleon was later. They sent him off to an island to die on the island. But he still had people who believed that he was really a Jew and that he was going to come back and he was going to return. And so it was a very strong movement. It was a really strange movement. It was not a good time in world Judaism.
And they probably sent him out because if they would have just killed him, then he would have become a martyr. And
right.
Even more people would.
Right. They learned that from Jesus. So,
right. That doesn't work very well.
Don't kill him. It's not a good idea.
Right. He might come back in 3 days.
So the Jews in this century, in the 1600s, lived through the Chmielnicki massacres, and then they also lived through the Sabbatean revolt. So you can imagine Jewish leaders after this stuff going on. There was a real sense of depression in the Jewish community after this happened. And although this isn't part of our discussion, some people say that the events here led to the rise of Hasidism later on. So what did the Hasidim say? The Hasidim said, we can't make the world better. We can't bring the Messiah. Yeah, well, make yourself better. So they went from the outward expression to the inward expression, and we can be the very, very best people we can be, and we can bring the Messiah by doing mitzvot every day. So if we do mitzvot, and we are personally observant, and we are happy, and we praise God, so that Hasidism may have come out of that. At any rate, that's...
Didn't really look like a unified Jewish community at this time.
Oh, it definitely wasn't.
Either.
Yeah.
And so that in itself, there's, the little bit I know, just through that, Renaissance period, there was so much assimilation anyways.
Yeah, there were Jews all over the place. I mean, they were really spread out. So after 10 years, Gluckel married Hirsch, a rich financier. Hirsch's later bankruptcy made life difficult in her final year. She died in 1724. She wrote her memoir in Yiddish in a style that makes us feel like we are accompanying her on life's journey. And then I just put down if you want to buy the book and read some more about it, there. That's the reference. All right, so I pulled out little pieces that primarily relate to her family, but also to the Sabbateans. So whose turn is it? I want to go around the other way.
Gluckel's testament to her children. My children, be devout and good. Serve the Lord God with all your heart, as well if things go well with you, as when, God forbid, all is not well. As we have to bless God for good, so also must we for evil. If he punishes you, do not be too grieved. Remember, everything comes from the Lord. Should, God forbid, children and dear friends die, do not grieve too much, for you did not create them. Almighty God, who created them when he desires, takes them again to him. What can the helpless mortal do? He himself must go the same way. So, my dear children, no matter what you may lose, be patient, for nothing belongs. It is only lent.
Okay, what do you think?
It's very sweet indeed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and she's looking ahead to when they're adults and life begins to knock them around.
That's right.
when did she actually write the memoir?
So she wrote the memoir when she was older already, so probably in the last 10 years of her life.
So it was after she had probably lost the money.
You're right.
So.
But you can tell...
She was 55 when she married Hirsch.
Right,
So.
Mhm.
right. And she was 78 when she died. So it's
She's also probably experienced loss.
Yeah, as I was going to say, I mean, she lost 2 kids. She's seen lots of other people
Right.
who lost children. She's had that experience, but you can tell her deep, deep faith in God. This is a
Right.
this is a very religious and devout woman. Compare her tone to Leon's tone.
Totally. She's
Yeah.
humble. He's not.
Right. It's about other people, not about her.
Mhm.
This is, this
Yeah.
is what I'm giving to you.
Mhm. Yeah, Leon is all about himself, and his perception of the world is the constellations have done me in. I'm a victim of bad luck.
Which is interesting. He doesn't say anything about God, does he? The last guy.
No, he doesn't talk about. And again, let's be fair to him. I only excerpted stuff, but she's got a totally different perceptions. Everything comes from God.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything is Lent.
Right, so
Don't be upset.
If it's
Even though
bad or if it's good, praise God about it and kind of move on where he's stuck.
Yeah.
But her perspective on humanity is still we're all helpless mortals.
Right.
Yeah, but it isn't an
But it's not
woe is
woe is
me.
me.
Right. Okay. Good. So
Right.
we're both are saying we're hopeless mortals. He's saying,
I can't do anything and I'm going to suffer.
yeah, I can't do it. I'm going to suffer. And I was seduced. I didn't put those sections in, but I was seduced by the sin of gambling. It happened to me as opposed to my being
Right.
responsible. Here it's helpless mortals, but let's move on.
Right. She's
Yeah.
saying,
And there's God here
to
to
live
help
your
us.
life and go on.
Right.
But I was going to
There's-
say, it's almost like Leonard feels helpless,
Mhm.
and she's hopeful.
That's right.
Right.
I think it's a nice,
Yeah.
It's like, yes, she recognizes we're helpless and that's why God is there.
Right.
but we're hopeful we can see, we can move forward.
There's a better light in the end.
And he couldn't move forward. Everything was,
And he probably turned to gambling because he couldn't see that there's other things he could do.
Mhm.
It was like, as long as everything's going to happen to me, I might as well, throw away some more stuff.
And his father wasn't a good role model for overcoming strife.
Oh no, right? Yeah, his father
So it was a pattern
That's
of,
right. Good.
it
Yeah.
was learned behavior.
Right. His father was a passive, depressed individual who couldn't move forward, and yeah. Okay, good. All right. Let's hear about Shabtai Tzvi a little bit. Fran, you want to read? During this time.
I was brought to bed by my daughter Mattie. She was a beautiful child. And also about this time, people began to talk about Shabtai Tzvi. But woe unto us, for we have sinned. For we did not live to see that which we had heard and hoped to see. When I remember the penance done by young and old, it is indescribably, though it is well enough known in the whole world. O Lord of the universe, at that time we hope that you, O merciful God, would have mercy on your people Israel and redeem us from our exile. We were like a woman in travail, a woman on the labor stool, who after a great labor and sore pains expects to rejoice at the birth of a child, but finds it is nothing but wind. This is my great God and King. This, my great God and King, happened to us. All your servants and children did much penance, recite many prayers, gave away much in charity throughout the world. For 2 or 3 years your people Israel sat at the labor stool, but nothing came save wind. We did not merit to see the longed-for child, but because of our sins, we were left neither here nor there, but in the middle.
Okay, so can you see the intensity of their longings? I mean, this was really solid belief. They just sat there and waited and expected to have this birth of redemption, and Messiah was coming.
Right, nothing happened.
It was a mass hysterical movement. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jews believed the Messiah was coming, and they were waiting.
but what's so interesting is, for modern day, we believe the Messiah comes through our work, through our actions, through doing mitzvot.
Mhm.
And the way she describes it, it was more like just waiting, not really moving forward, not really
Right.
doing
Well,
anything.
because the guy said he was the Messiah.
Right. So it wasn't they were waiting for a anonymous Messiah to come. Bless you, bless you.
Thank you.
They were waiting for this particular guy who said he was the Messiah, who Nathan sends out letters saying that he was the Messiah, and get yourselves ready and pack yourself up, and they're waiting. Okay, next paragraph.
The joy when letters arrived telling about Shabtai Tzvi is not to be described. Most of the letters were received by the Portuguese Jews. They took them to their synagogue and read them aloud there. The Germans, young and old, went into the Portuguese synagogues to hear them. The young Portuguese on these occasions all wore their best clothes, and each tied a broad green silk ribbon round his waist. This was Shabtai's color. So all went with joy to hear the letters. Many people sold home, hearth, and everything they possessed, awaiting redemption.
So
They all drank the Kool-Aid.
yeah, and you I mean, so I was telling you about the depression, but it wasn't just a matter of that. So when they found out the Messiah wasn't coming, they didn't have any. They didn't have
There
any
was
money.
nothing left.
Right. They had no
They-
homes. They had no goods. They had sold
What
everything.
happened to them?
They were waiting.
Probably
Pardon?
a lot of them
So they
killed
ended up being
themselves, I would
impoverished.
imagine.
And just all died of hunger?
Well, no, they didn't die of hunger. So the community took care of them, but it was difficult. So, to be fair, it wasn't everybody. There were rabbis who were opposed to this. There were rabbis who said, "Don't be crazy." There were community leaders who said, "Don't be crazy," but a lot of the people were crazy.
So the Portuguese Jews were all the Spartans.
Yeah, so the Portuguese Jews who had moved into Germany.
Right.
All right, now a sad little part. Lisa, do you want to?
My dear Maddie, peace be unto her, was in her 3rd year, and a more beautiful and clever child was nowhere to be seen.
Isn't that nice? I mean, mommy loves her daughter and couldn't see anyone more beautiful. Okay.
Not only do we love her, but everyone who saw her and heard her speak was delighted with her. But the dear Lord loved her more. When she entered her 3rd year, her hands and feet suddenly swelled. Although he had many doctors and much medicine, it suited him to take her to himself after 4 weeks of great suffering, and left as our portion heartache and suffering. My husband and I mourned indescribably and feared greatly that I had sinned against the Almighty by mourning too much.
Okay, so what do you think now?
Heartbroken.
Pardon? She was heartbroken, right? But you can also, I mean, she's heartbroken, but you can also tell the way that she deals with it is that is through her belief in God, that God had taken her, and that she was with God. And I love the line where it says, not only did we love her, but everyone who saw her and heard her speak was delighted with her. But the dear Lord loved her more. So that's the old expression of, she was taken because God
Right.
loved you. That was her way of understanding it, that God wanted her.
Well, it's like some
Next, yeah.
stuff that I've read, like about dealing with loss of a child, puts it in those similar terms, that God takes perfection,
Mm-hmm.
and she sort of looked at it like that, that when they've done mitzvot, enough mitzvot, that God takes them,
Right, so
and that's the way she.
Right, so that's one of the things that they talk about, or some people talk about, is that when children die and when they're still very young, that there's resurrection, the right word? You come back in.
Reincarnation.
Thank you, reincarnation. So you come back in a different life. And so when you come back, you have a certain number of mitzvot you're supposed to perform. So if you die when you're only 3, or you die when you're 8 months, or whatever it is, you've done whatever mitzvot you have to do, so now God will take you. I don't know if that's necessarily comforting, but certainly that's out there.
Just some of the
Yeah.
stuff that I've read,
Right.
modern day literature says it very similar to what she's
Right.
writing here.
All right, so let's move from the death of a child to the marriage of a child. Barbara, you want to read?
A wedding. Our business prospered, and Zipporah, our eldest child, was now a girl of almost 12.
Very
Oh.
rough.
Almost 12. Oh my
We're-
God, she's so old.
We're at Loeb Hamburger in Amsterdam. The son of Reb Amschel proposed her marriage to Kosman, the son of Elias Cleve of blessed memory. Elias was the founder of a large banking house in Emmerich, and later a store and bank in Berlin.
Okay, so he had money. So it was a good shidduch. All right, keep going.
My husband was accustomed to travel to Amsterdam twice a year, and now, after writing the marriage broker, he was coming to see what could be done. He set forth 6 weeks in advance of his usual time. The country wasn't warm, and Elias Cleve had left his home in Cleves and moved with his people to Amsterdam.
Okay, so I was talking about before that there's instability and lots of wars going on, and you had to live through that. But what they have to do is they have to complete the shidduch here. Okay, keep going.
Well, my blessed...
You missed the part where they want to marry off Zipporah.
Okay.
Because Zipporah is almost 12 years old now. Okay.
My God.
Well, my blessed husband concluded the match with rich Elias Cleve and settled on our daughter a dowry of 2,200 Reichsdollars in Dutch money. They fixed the wedding for a year and a half later in Cleves. My husband likewise undertook to contribute 100 Reichsdollars towards the wedding expenses.
Okay. So they came up with the money. They figured out the dowry would be 2,200 Reichsdollars. I have no idea how much that is. But they also had to figure who was going to pay for the wedding. So on her end, Dad's going to pay 100 Reichsdollars for his part of the wedding expenses. Okay, Marlene, you want to keep going?
When time for the marriage drew near, I was a babe at my
with a baby at my breast.
I was a babe at my breast. My husband, my daughter Zipporah, the bride, our Rabbi Meir, who was now the rabbi of Friedberg, a maidservant, and a man, Elig, Sam and son.
Right.
A great
Regiment.
retinue. Set forth for the wedding. I cannot begin to tell you what a merry voyage it was. And after a gay and delightful trip, we arrived safely in Amsterdam.
All right, so the wedding is coming up, and they've got the wedding party,
great.
and the wedding party is getting in a ship or whatever, and they're going off to Amsterdam to go to the wedding, and they've got a couple of servants and brought a rabbi along. 14 days before the marriage.
Baby.
Yeah,
At the breast.
baby at the breast.
Right, so.
Yeah, right, she had a baby. so-
Right, but it doesn't sound like she brought any other kids with her.
Oh,
She left them just wandering
I
around.
remember they had money, so they
Oh,
probably.
they probably had,
They had nannies.
Yeah.
they had nannies who stayed.
So 14 days before the marriage, we set forth with timbrels and with dances, 20 strong, for Cleves, where we were welcomed with all honors. We found ourselves in a house that was truly a king's palace, magnificently furnished in every way. The livelong day we had no rest for the elegant lords and ladies who had came to peek at the bride. And in truth, my daughter looked so beautiful that her like was never seen. Proud, proud
That's
mama.
great.
As the bridal pair were led beneath the chuppah, out it came in the confusion. We'd forgotten to write the marriage contract. So what did they forget to do?
No
They didn't have a
ketubah.
They didn't have a ketubah. What was to be done? Nobility and princes were already at hand, and they were all agog to see the ceremony. Whereas Rabbi Meir declared that the groom should appoint a bondsman to write out the contract immediately after the wedding. So then the rabbi read a set contract from a book, and so the couple were joined. So what did they do?
This was they used,
A pretend one.
The-
Or the form.
Yeah, form,
right,
yeah.
the form, yeah, it was
Right, so they got married using the form.
like a form letter ketubah.
And then
Fill
they
in the
decided
blanks.
that after the wedding, then they would do the handwritten ketubah. You would never get a rabbi to do that today. Right? But this rabbi was a little more liberal, wanted to have it done. Okay. After the ceremony, all the distinguished guests were ushered into Elias Cleves' enormous salon, with its walls of leather tooled in gold. There stood the mighty table laden with dainties fit for a king, and the company was served according to their rank. My son Mordecai was then a child of about 5. There was not a prettier boy in the entire world, and we had him dressed in the neatest and best. All the nobility wanted to eat him up on the spot, and the prince in particular, God brighten his fame, never let go of his never let go his hand. So I love the way she writes. She writes in a nice, homey fashion, and you get a sense of being a very, very loving mother who loves her kid. When the guests of honor had eaten of the fruits and the cakes and had done justice to the wine, it's not a whole lot different than today.
Right.
Okay? The table was cleared and removed, and then appeared masked performers who bowed prettily and played all manners of entertaining pranks. They concluded their performance with a truly splendid dance of death, a joyous dance that included some kissing.
Hey,
It just
they did
cost us-
shtick.
It cost us 200 Reichsfelders for David's wedding.
So as it was, the young prince and Prince Maurice and all the noble-born guests departed in great content. So there were non-Jews at the wedding, right? So there was
Right.
the heads of the country were there, and never a Jew received such a high honor in 100 years. And the wedding was brought to a happy end. Kosman became a printer and publisher in Amsterdam. His grandson was a teacher of Moses Mendelssohn, who we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Part of the reason why I gave you these things, both the previous one and this one, was to show you that we get this picture of life for Jews always being miserable, right? We got, living in poverty and not being able to accomplish anything and not moving forward. So Leon, for all his depression and for all his constellation stuff, really made a lot of himself and had a fair number of successes. And this family too, even though there were wars and life could be tough for the Jews, and they were worried about pogroms periodically, not pogroms, but blood libels periodically, there were long periods in which things went well. Okay, so we did one about a child dying. Let's do one about a child recovering.
A child recovers. On the Day of Atonement, my grandchild Elias fell sick, and for 8 days lay racked with fits. The child suffered so grievously that more than once I prayed God in my heart to shorten his agony. For neither man nor doctor believed the child could recover, but the Father of goodness in the flash of an eye took mercy on him and sent him healing.
Can you imagine? So here's the grandmother praying
For her child to
for her grandchild to
Right,
die,
right.
because that's how sick he was.
I don't know if she prayed so much for him to die, but not to suffer.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I think that looking at it, you
Says
know,
to shorten his agony.
shorten his agony.
Okay, good point. Okay, that's a different interpretation of it. Okay, good. All right, keep going.
Where you may learn that God can help when all human effort has failed, and God makes fools of doctors and healers, as it is said, "For I am the Lord that healeth thee." I praise and thank him all my days, and may the good and great God grant that his parents lead him to the Torah, the wedding canopy, and to deeds of loving kindness. It is not hard to imagine my daughter's joy, and how for the new life given to her child she lavished large sums upon charity, and much of it secretly, for her husband, like so many others, had his heart bound up in mere money.
All right, so
You should.
the child recovered. She was excited. The daughter gave money to charity, but why did she do it secretly?
Because her husband
Was cheap.
watched every penny.
Right, her husband watched every penny. Okay, so we heard about,
But that's just so like today. I mean, how many couples, everybody has a little secret stash or something, you read these articles, and it's just...
It sounds like, because there later became or at some point, when somebody becomes so grievously ill that they would change their name, and it sounds like they didn't have that custom here.
right, well, not that we know of anyway.
Right, because, I mean, this would be a time where,
Right time
you
to
know,
do that.
you'd want to change the name because it keeps the evil spirits away.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Moses Mendelssohn. Just a little bit of Moses Mendelssohn. Moses Mendelssohn was a German Jew, lived in the 1700s. I'm not going to read the background at this point, but he was brilliant. He basically was self-educated. He was admitted into Berlin at a certain point. Jews weren't allowed into the big cities, and they needed special passes. But because he was so bright, he was eventually brought in, and he was eventually given special status. And Moses Mendelssohn became the darling of the German intelligentsia. So he was the first Jew who was accepted for his knowledge and for his abilities. And one of the things that he did was that he wrote a translation of the Tanakh in German in Hebrew letters. So it was German using Hebrew letters. So it was his intent to use this as a means to help German Jews learn German, because they knew the Tanakh almost by heart, so they could read it and then they would begin to understand German using this system. He was okay. Let's look at the height of his career. So you're sitting in the middle there of page 7.
At the height of his career in 1769, Mendelssohn was publicly challenged by a Christian apologist, a Zurich pastor named John Lavater, to defend his superiority of Judaism over Christianity. From then on, he was involved in defending Judaism in print. In 1783, he published Jerusalem, or On Religious Power and Jerusalem. This study posted that no religious institution could coercion and emphasize
Could use coercion.
could use coercion and emphasize that Judaism does not coerce the mind through dogma. He argued that through reason all people could discover religious, philosophical truths, but what made Judaism unique was its divinely revealed code of legal, ritual, and moral law. He said that Jews must live in civil society, but only in a way that their right to observe religious laws are granted. He recognized the necessity of multiple religions and respected each one.
Okay, so basically he believed that Judaism was an entirely illogical religion. In his book, he tried to explain the logic of Judaism. He was also a big promoter that one could be a good German and also be a good Jew. So he was in many ways the first modern Jew, that you could live both. Just read one more paragraph.
Mendelssohn wanted to take the Jews out of the ghetto life and into secular society. He translated the Bible into German, although it was written in Hebrew letters, with a Hebrew commentary called the Biur. Biur. He campaigned for emancipation and instructed Jews to form bonds with the Gentile governments. He tried to improve the relationship between Jews and Christians, as he argued for tolerance and humanity. He became the symbol of the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah.
Okay, turn the page. So, he was a one-man Jewish emancipation in Germany. It was because of him that German Jews began to move into Christian society and get good German education and to be more fully part of the general society. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of generations of Mendelssohns through some letters. So the first one is Moses Mendelssohn writing a letter to his friend about his son Joseph's Jewish education, or about his son Joseph's education. So what we're going to see here is a father's concerned about education. We're also going to see a father's concerned about his son, and can also get a sense about what boys learned at that time. Lisa, you want to read?
My son Joseph has all but given up his Hebrew studies.
That's, what happens?
He quit Hebrew school?
Yeah, he doesn't want to go to Hebrew school anymore. 1765, he doesn't want to go to Hebrew school anymore. Okay.
Immediately following your tutelage, he unfortunately fell into the hands of a scholar who proved to be a hollow ball
Pilpul.
Pilpul?
So what that means is that Hertz used to be his teacher, but Hertz was a good teacher. And he followed into another teacher who all he wanted to do was, Pilpul means to teach the fine details of Jewish law. So he was more interested in the details than in the broader things. Okay. Keep going.
And as much as Joseph loves intellectual acuity and scholarly disputation, he lacks a sense for real Pilpul. As you know, it takes a very special kind of instruction to develop a taste for this sort of mental exercise. And though both you and I underwent this training, you will recall that we agreed Joseph's mind should remain a little duller than be sharpened in so sterile a manner.
Okay, so what does he not want him to do?
Doesn't like looking at details.
He doesn't want to learn Talmud, basically. He doesn't want to learn all the details of Jewish law. Doesn't want him to sit and to learn about Rabbi this said this, and Rabbi this said this, and Rabbi this said this. So even though you and I, the fathers, had this kind of, I don't want this for my kid. Okay.
Well, the distaste he felt for this teacher's instruction has made him reject all Hebrew studies. He is, however, making good progress in the natural sciences. He penetrates deeply into his subject matter, and though he looks intently and searchingly at everything, he never jumps to conclusions, which such a young fireman might well be expected to do.
So he doesn't know, he's not doing very good in Hebrew school, doesn't like Hebrew school, doesn't like the teacher doesn't know how to teach him. But what's he doing well in?
Science.
Okay. A generation earlier, you never would have heard that. You may have heard it in Italy, but you wouldn't have heard it in Germany, because the German Jews didn't get into that. But he's studying science, and he seems to have a good mind for science. He's not jumping to conclusions. Now, next one.
We have not yet come to any decision concerning his future.
Okay, so what's he worried about?
Getting
College?
married and
I don't know.
Yeah, he's worried about college. What's he going to be when he grows up? Okay.
And I'm still not sure how best to counsel him. His talents and gifts for the natural sciences would lead one to expect him to excel in this field. As a Jew, however, he can only practice medicine, for which he has neither the liking nor the aptitude. And it is, I think, still too early to groom him for a business career.
So what can you be as a Jew?
Maybe as a physician.
You can be a doctor, or you can go
Right.
into business.
Well,
right?
Christians weren't allowed to be physicians. So.
Right. So you could be a doctor, or you
Jews
can
got
go
it.
into business. And he doesn't really have a head for business either. Okay.
Right now, it might therefore be best to let him study whatever he wants or feels inclined to. This would, to say the least, not be detrimental to him if he were to indeed become a businessman. Or he could, if need be, do what his father had to do, muddle through, now as a scholar, now as a businessman. Though this carries with it the danger that one ends up being not being really either.
Right. Okay. So can you feel the anguish of
Oh,
Moses
well, I can't be a
Mendelssohn
doctor.
here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got this son Joseph, and he wants his son to be something, and his son can't. Problems we have today, the problems they had back then, and what's he going to be? What does he not suggest he's going to be? Doesn't suggest to become a rabbi, right? No rabbi for my
Well,
son.
he quit Hebrew school. How can he become a rabbi?
That's right. Okay, turn back to the previous page. To page 7. Okay. So,
Page 7.
page 7. Moses Mendelssohn, who opened the doors to Jews, who believed that one could be a good German and also be a good Jew at the same time. Now we'll read the last paragraph. Mendelssohn had 10 children, 6 of whom lived to adulthood. Of those 6 children, only Recha and Joseph retained the Jewish faith. Abraham Mendelssohn, because of his conversion to Christianity, adopted the surname Bartholdy at the suggestion of his wife's brother. So 4 of his 6 adult children converted, became good Protestants. Why?
He encouraged them to
Because
be
they
part of
said
German
it.
He
society.
never convinced, right, he converted to kind of German society and to enter into the upper echelons of German society and be fully accepted. What did you need to do?
Couldn't be Jewish.
Couldn't be Jewish. Okay, so let's look at a letter here.
So it's interesting, one kid, Joseph, actually retained it.
Yeah,
One didn't do well in Hebrew school.
But he
Yeah.
stayed, but
He
he
was going to
stayed.
stay Jewish.
Okay, this is a letter from Jacob Bartholdy to Abraham Mendelssohn, his brother-in-law. So Abraham Mendelssohn was one of Moses' sons. His brother-in-law was Jacob Bartholdy. So in other words, Jacob married Abraham's sister. Okay. I was not convinced by your arguments for holding on to your name and faith. Such arguments are no longer valid in our times. So what is Jacob trying to convince Abraham?
To convert.
Not yet convert.
To convert.
He's trying to convince him to convert. You say you owe it to your father's memory, but do you think it would be wrong to give your children the religion which you regard as the best one? This would be the greatest tribute you or anybody could pay to your father's efforts to spread the light and the knowledge. In your place, he would have done exactly the same for his children, and in my place, perhaps exactly what I have done. So he's already converted. And he's changed his name to Bartholdy. You may remain loyal to a despised, persecuted religion and pass it on to your children along with a life of suffering as long as you believe it to be the absolute truth. But it is barbaric to do so when you no longer believe. So what happened in 20 years? And within a relatively short time, Judaism was no longer relevant. And why should you continue to be a Jew if you don't believe it? And what does he call it? And what does he call Judaism? Despised and persecuted.
religion.
And a life of suffering.
Okay. I urge you to adopt the name Mendelssohn Bartholdy to mark yourself apart from the other Mendelssohns. So change your name and call Bartholdy. I use the name Bartholdy. It was after a place where I used to live. This would please me very much because it would be the means of preserving my memory in the family. This would enable you to accomplish your end conveniently, for in France and other places, it is customary to add the names of one's wife's family to one's own. So so change your name. So in the end, he did convert. Okay. Now, this is the next generation.
Abraham? You talked Abraham
Yeah,
converted?
Abraham
Pardon? He did
converted.
convert. He did convert.
But, so, Jacob wants Abraham to take the name to preserve preserve Jacob's memory in the family?
Right. So,
Did he have no children?
pardon?
Did Jacob?
I don't know, but it's not so much his memory, but to hold on to the name Bartholdy,
Oh, okay.
to maintain the name
So-
Bartholdy. So he
Okay.
wouldn't be the only Bartholdy. There would be other
Oh,
Bartholdy.
okay. All right.
Okay. So now Abraham has children. He's got at least 2. One's name is Fanny, and the other, you may know the name is Felix. You know Felix Mendelssohn,
Yes.
famous composer.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a selection from Abraham Mendelssohn to his daughter Fanny when she was confirmed in the church. So she was born Jewish, but then he converted and he had her converted as well. The outward form of religion your teacher has given you is historical and changeable like all human ordinances. Some thousands of years ago, the Jewish form was the reigning one, and then the heathen form, and now it's Christian. We, your mother and I, were born and brought up by our parents as Jews, and without being obliged to change the form of our religion, have been able to follow the divine instinct in us and in our conscience. We have educated you and your brothers and sisters in the Christian faith, because it is the creed of most civilized people, and contains nothing that can lead you away from what is good, and much that guides you to love, obedience, tolerance, and resignation, even if it offered nothing but the example of its founder, understood by so few and followed by still fewer. So what why do they want her to be Jewish?
Because they think it's civilized.
Yeah, it's civilized, right? Are they having a spiritual conversion experience here?
No, it's
No.
practical.
No, it's practical, right? And why?
That's interesting.
Oh, it's Siri. What do you want to convert?
It's so funny.
Mendelssohn
Thank you,
from a
Siri.
Jew to a Christian.
And what?
So weird.
And what? And what is it about Christianity? That's what I was going to ask you.
It's convenient.
Yeah, it's convenient and it can't hurt you. It's not
Tolerated.
bad. It's not going to do anything bad to you. So you might as well just become Christian. So we're really seeing a change over 2 generations. From a grandfather who was firm in his conviction of being Jewish and wrote books about being Jewish, but he opened the doors to his children and his grandchildren. The main reason for doing this, again, was for most of the Germans who converted, was not because they believed in Jesus or because they believed that he was Messiah, or they believed that it would give them penance for their sins. It was because it moved them into
Was
the upper
expedient.
echelons. Pardon?
Was there anything of Moses Mendelssohn's writings where he regretted encouraging? No.
No, I don't think any of his children converted till after he died. So he didn't know that.
Okay.
All right, here's another one. This is a fascinating letter. Again, it's Abraham Mendelssohn, same guy. And he changed his name to Abraham Mendelssohn Bartholdy. And he's writing a letter to Felix. So Felix, as you know, was a famous musician and
Right.
composer. He was never Jewish. But his father wanted him to change his name. His father wanted him to change his name from Mendelssohn to something else that was less Jewish.
yeah.
Okay, so here it goes. The name Mendelssohn acquired a messianic import and a significance which defies extinction. This, considering you were raised a Christian, you can hardly understand. A Christian Mendelssohn is impossibility. A Christian Mendelssohn the world will never recognize. Nor should there be a Christian Mendelssohn, for my father himself did not want to be a Christian. Mendelssohn does and always stands for Judaism in transition. I reared you without religion in any form. Eventually, I was obliged to do the choosing for you. Naturally, when you consider what scant value I placed on any form in particular, I felt no urge to choose Judaism, the most antiquated, distorted, and self-defacing form of all. Therefore, I reared you as Christians. I should have discarded the name Mendelssohn immediately. I repeat, there can be no more be a Christian Mendelssohn than there can be a Jewish Confucius. If Mendelssohn is your name, you are ipso facto a Jew.
Wow.
You must not carry on the name Mendelssohn. Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy is too long. It's unsuited for daily.
How old
Yes.
is he?
But he kept
I mean,
his
how
name
is- how
Felix
old is
Mendelssohn.
Felix?
He's an adult at this point.
Oh.
So he's an adult. He's already getting recognition as a composer.
Right.
And his father is trying to say him, get rid of the name.
But he got rid of the name Bartholdy.
Yeah, Bartholdy got rid of it.
Right.
Mendelssohn.
He kept Mendelssohn.
So,
Was he Jewish?
Pardon?
Did he?
No.
Did he?
No?
No?
No.
No.
He never converted, but he never got
He
rid of
kept the
that
Jewish name.
So what you have is the grandson. So so Abraham Mendelssohn was invested in totally getting rid of any Jewish
Right.
identity at all. But
He
the
can't be
grandson,
Schwartz, it sounds too Jewish.
right. But the grandson was still wanted to hold on to that little piece from his grandfather. So even though he wasn't Jewish, he wasn't going to get rid of the
Right.
name being son of Mendel. Right. He still wanted to hold on to that. But it's really an interesting tale because Moses was very interested in promoting Judaism, was very interested in maintaining the faith. He really believed that by moving the Jews into the modern world, life would be good for the Jews and they needed this. And then just a short time
Right,
later.
and then it turns out that they took the good life and left the Jewish part away.
That's right. So he moved him into the real world without the Jewish part.
Probably not what
It's
he
kind of
was
scary,
planning on.
you know?
Pardon?
I said it's scary.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens.
Well,
It's the
although,
constant tension always.
Mhm.
right, if you assimilate too much, you're going to lose who you are.
And it's not a whole lot different than today.
No.
So what's happening today, you don't have the need to convert anymore, but people will just move into the general, young kids will just move into the general culture and say, I don't need that stuff anymore.
And I mean, Christianity's disappearing too.
Right.
I mean, it's dissipating. People don't go to church as much.
Mhm. There were thousands of German Jews who in the late 1700s, 1800s converted to Christianity as their means for entering into Protestant society.
And a lot of people who came here would change their name so that they wouldn't be, they wouldn't, those who stayed Jewish changed their name so they wouldn't sound like they were Jewish, so they could move in society and not just be,
Are you suggesting that Parker is not a good Jewish name?
It was probably Parkerson.
Did I ever tell you what my name was?
What was your name?
Yeah. I don't remember what it was, but you have
Yeah.
mentioned.
So I know this is true because my son went to Nova Scotia and found the listed name from the boat that my family
Right.
came in. So it was there. So our name was originally Pippic.
Pippic?
Oh.
Oh, how funny.
And your grandfather's name was Moishe?
My cousin was Moshe. So
I knew there had to be a Moishe.
We're
Pippin.
in Nova Scotia.
Halifax.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of family from Halifax, Moncton, New Brunswick.
Oh. They didn't stay there very long.
Well,
They
when
stayed
I
there.
was in Israel, not this time, but the time before, and I was at Yad Vashem, and I was going through the lists looking for family names, and I couldn't find a Ross, and I couldn't find a Coleman. And I came home and I said to my dad, Daddy, there's not a single family member that's in the book. And he said, because we had all been in Canada in like the 1800s. They had left and went to Moncton, New Brunswick, to Halifax, to
Ignace,
all in Canada, St.
John.
John. So it was interesting, and you said, and it's a small community.
There's a
that
very
they
small
never-
synagogue in St. John's.
But they never came through the
About
United
8
States.
people,
They came
not quite
through.
enough to make a minion.
Yeah, well, my family was on their way to Vancouver. So they went from Poland to Halifax and took the train across to Vancouver. That's
Well,
what
we
they did.
stopped. We went from
Yeah.
Poland
How'd
and
they
stopped.
end up back in Toronto?
My father and then my uncles. So some of my father and at least one of my uncles were marriageable age, and the Jewish community in Vancouver was too small. There weren't enough women.
So they went to the
they
big
said,
city.
Go east, young man. So they went to Toronto to look for wives.
So interesting to look
That's
at
so
the
cool.
paths that people take. And really, this is probably the beginning. When you think this is like the 1800s.
Still 1700s. But.
Or 17,
Yeah, so this is really the beginning of opening the doors to Jewish acceptance, and opening the doors to Jewish acceptance has hazards to go along with it, and we see it within this one family.
It's remarkable that there is still such a large Jewish community that when you think about, just these three
Right.
stories that we've read and time after time, how we've been dispersed and broken up, and the lineage continues.
Right.
Do you have a sense of what Jewish population has been throughout history? I mean, has it ebbed and flowed wildly, or has it pretty much stayed?
I think it's a good question. You may want to ask Howie that question, but so prior to World War II, we had huge numbers of Jews in Poland and in Russia, and that was probably the biggest Jewish population
In
ever.
2,000 years of history?
Yeah, in 2,000 years of history, because we had gone through huge, many years of persecution in very, very small communities. So probably, my guess is if you asked him, he would tell you that the Russian-Polish community was, where there were 3 million Jews, were our biggest numbers.
So we've probably stayed stable at something much less
Yeah.
throughout history.
Yeah, we had hundreds of thousands of Jews in Spain, but also we had hundreds of thousands of Jews in Spain who converted to Catholicism because they were forced into converting. But yeah, the numbers were small. All right, so next week we're going to move into late 19th century, early 20th century, and then 2 weeks after that we will do a summary session and seeing what we've learned over 2,000 years of Jewish parenting.
I might bring my daughter next week.
Okay.
She'll be in town.
All right.
Thank you.
My uncle, when he, their name was Rosenthal, was my mom and brother were the only two who survived to come over of my grandparents' children, and he wanted to become an electrician. So he changed his name to Ross, because couldn't get into the electricians union because he was a Jew.
Mhm.
So even though he stayed being Jewish, he had to change his name and
What was
for
his name before?
Rosenthal.
Oh, okay.
And so he became Ross, and it didn't sound quite as
So interesting, because that's
Jewish.
my main
I've heard a lot
name.
of people who've done that.
There's probably thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
stories like that. If you
Rose,
right, that
Ross.
Or change
that
it.
people had to, and they changed when my great grandparents on my father's side went to the Ellis Island of England. They couldn't read the little slip of paper like happened here, and they saw that they were Jews. Said, "Oh, your name's Levine. We've lost our name. We have no idea what
Yeah.
our original name was." They don't have quite as good records here as we do.
I mean, we could do it. We could do a quick study of 30s and 40s and 50s Hollywood, and
Oh,
look at
yeah.
the people who changed the Jewish people who changed their names. Kirk Douglas and Danny Kaye and all those people.
And Kirk Douglas,
Irving Berlin.
Yeah, Irving Berlin.
at 70 rediscovered his Jewishness.
Judaism.
It was like, yeah.
Jack Benny, I'm sure, was something else.
I think.
George Burns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
I
first.
saw him
yeah.
once
But some
in
people we
New
knew they
Really?
were Jewish.
My
great.
brother had a friend who was his nephew, and so when my brother went to his bar mitzvah, he got to meet Uncle George.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mitch, I need to get a card from you.
But yeah, it's
I may-
Lauren Bacall.
Yeah.
I don't know what her name was, but I know it was not Lauren Bacall.
Betty.
Yeah, Betty something, yeah. I know it was Betty.
Gotta go on.
It was also with a K, I think, like Kaminsky or Kansky.
Yeah.
Yeah, every once in a while I go
You
on
can ask
Juna.
you can ask Siri what Lauren Bacall's real name is.
Right, since Sarah, you really
Why
want
does
to
she want
change
to
it,
give
but
her
too.
no?
Right, totally. Yeah, you ever go on the website Jew Not a Jew?
Pardon? Yeah.
And because there's people, that it's like
Norman Jewison, not a Jew.
not a Jew, right? How could
She
somebody
have a little
named Jewison not be a Jew, or the son of a Jew?
That was kind of weird. Have a good holiday.
I know you got one with a learning problem.
Right, that's at,
Everybody have a happy
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
that.